The morning began with calm skies over the new Geneva Research Dome. The air was cool. The sunlight touched the glass roofs with a golden glow. Inside the dome, people followed their usual routine. Scientists checked machines, engineers typed notes, and drones hummed as they floated across long corridors. Everything seemed normal until a loud alarm broke the rhythm. Ethan Grayson had been sipping cold coffee when he heard the first warning sound. He looked up, startled, as the observation screen flashed bright red. Something was entering the atmosphere, moving faster than any known ship. For a moment he thought it was a meteor, but the object slowed down, rolled sideways, and began to glow in soft blue light. Ethan jumped from his seat. "It's no meteor," he whispered. Outside, the sky turned strange. People came running to the observation windows as a stream of light tore through the clouds and curved down toward the eastern valley. The trail was not burning fire, but gentle light, like water bending in the air. Those who watched it fell silent. It did not crash the way normal space debris did. Instead, it glided down as though guided by quiet hands. An hour later, a team was ready to investigate. Ethan volunteered instantly. He was trained as a cultural liaison, a job that mostly meant meeting visitors and not making a fool of himself. He was good at reading faces and explaining big ideas slowly. Plus, he was curious in the way that sometimes got him into trouble. The team drove out through the valley in small ground vehicles. The sun had risen high by the time they reached the landing site. The place smelled faintly of ozone and flowers, though there were no flowers in sight. A circle of ground had turned silver, smooth like glass. In the middle of the circle stood something tall and quiet. First glance, it looked like a crystal tower about 10 meters high. But when Ethan walked closer, he saw that it was not a solid structure. The surface rippled when the wind moved. It was hard to tell whether it was a machine or a living thing. He raised a scanner, but the screen showed nothing. No radiation, no engine signal, no known material. It's just energy in motion. Suddenly, the surface shifted. It folded open like the petals of a flower, revealing a hollow space inside. A soft hum filled the air, low and steady, like a heartbeat from a distance. Inside the light stood people. Ethan froze. They looked human, completely human. Their skin was pale but warm, their eyes bright and reflective like shining water. Their clothes were made of thin layers that caught the sunlight and shimmered softly. They looked around with the same wonder that filled the faces of the research team. For several seconds, everyone just stared at each other. Then one of the new arrivals, a young woman with golden hair tied loosely behind her, stepped forward. Her expression was calm and curious. She said something in broken English, slow and careful. "Do not fear. Come to learn." Her voice was musical but steady. Ethan blinked and nodded at once. "We do not fear," he said, his throat dry. "We also want to learn." The woman smiled and the corners of her eyes softened. She looked around at the circle of soldiers and scientists, then turned her gaze back to Ethan. Something in her eyes carried both strength and sadness. There was grace in the way she moved, as though she had practiced peace for a long time. When she raised her hand, the other travelers stepped out of the shining structure. Each moved lightly, quietly, carrying no visible tools or weapons. Behind them, the structure dimmed but did not disappear. It had stood silent, as if it was waiting for their return. The lead officer whispered through his radio, asking the base how to proceed. The voices on the line were urgent and unsure. Meanwhile, Ethan kept his eyes on the woman. He noticed that she watched him too. Her expression held a spark of recognition, though they had never met. "What is your name?" Ethan asked, his voice almost a whisper. She paused before answering. "Leora," she said, slow and clear. "And you are Ethan?" She nodded once. "Ethan," she repeated, pronouncing each letter carefully. Then she smiled again, the kind of smile that seemed to light up the silent valley. The wind rose between them, gentle and cool. The hum from the glowing structure faded into soft silence. Birds began to sing somewhere in the distant trees, as if the world had decided it was safe again. No one spoke for a long while. The scientists were still working their scanners, the soldiers watched carefully, and the strange visitors stood quietly under the morning sun. But in that quiet, something changed. The first step of a new story had been taken, not with battle or urgency, but with a shared look and a smile. Ethan knew somehow that whatever had begun here in this valley would reach far beyond the hills, beyond the glass domes, maybe even beyond the stars. But for now, all he could do was stand there, amazed, trying to steady his heartbeat as the woman with the mirror eyes studied him in calm curiosity. Days passed after the landing. The valley where the shining structure stood was now guarded by soldiers and filled with scientists, cameras, and curious workers. The world had seen the news, and every country wanted to know who these visitors were. Yet no one called them strange anymore. They looked too human for that. They spoke slowly, learned fast, and never acted with fear. Ethan was given a special job by the Research Council. He was to stay close to the visitors and study their language and customs. He did not argue. He quietly packed a small bag, found his old notebook, and moved into the small white camp near the valley. There he met the young woman again. She was always calm, always careful with her words. She liked to look at the sky before answering any question, as if listening to something far away before speaking. Her name, Leora, was now known to everyone at the dome. People spoke her name with respect or with doubt, depending on what they expected from her. Some thought she brought hope. Others whispered that she was hiding secrets. Ethan spent long hours talking with her. He taught her simple English words she could understand easily. In return, she showed him how her people used light in everything they built. She said her world was not under the same sun as this one, yet the same kind of people lived there. The difference was how they chose to grow. Ethan could not understand everything, but her eyes told him she spoke truth. At night the camp lights glowed softly under the clouds. Many times Ethan found himself near the glowing structure that the visitors had arrived in. It still pulsed faintly with color, as though breathing in sleep. He sometimes wondered if it knew he was there. One evening, as he walked toward the valley edge, he found Leora watching the horizon. The wind moved her hair across her face. Her hands were clasped in front of her, and there was a faraway sadness in her eyes. He stopped beside her and said quietly, "You miss your home, don't you?" She nodded slowly. "Yes, my people can open the way only for a short time. We must learn quickly. Then we return." Ethan frowned. "Return? So soon?" She looked up at the first stars. "Our world and yours are connected. Long ago, something happened that divided them. We found how to cross the space between. But this door cannot stay open for long." He tried to smile. "Oh, then we should talk faster." That made her laugh softly, a gentle sound that carried across the valley. "Yes," she said. In the following days, they worked side by side. They explained how Earth's people fought and loved, how they built cities and dreamed of space. She listened closely and sometimes asked strange, simple questions. "Why do so many fight for borders on one small world?" she asked one afternoon. Ethan had no answer, except a heavy sigh. Meanwhile, the leaders from several countries arrived at the dome. They met behind glass walls and argued for hours. The visitors offered knowledge about clean energy, medicine, and peaceful governance. The human officials wanted blueprints, samples, and control. When Leora learned of it, her calm face became cold. "They wish to own what is meant to be shared," she said quietly. Ethan tried to explain that people feared what they did not understand. "They are not all greedy," he said. "Some want peace too." Leora looked at him with serious eyes. "And you?" He paused. "I want peace and truth." Her gaze softened again. "Then we have the same wish." Late one night, while the camp slept, Ethan heard low voices outside his tent. Two officers were discussing a plan. They spoke of capturing the shining structure and taking it to the capital. Ethan's chest tightened. He knew what that could mean: conflict, mistrust, maybe a disaster. He rushed to warn Leora. When he told her, she did not panic. Instead, she placed her hand lightly against his arm. "If they take it by force, the light will break. Many will be hurt." "Then we have to stop them," Ethan said. His heart beat fast, his mind already turning. She looked at him steadily. "Will you stand with me?" He hesitated only a moment. Yes. The next morning, soldiers gathered near the structure. Leora stood before them without fear. Her voice carried across the valley as she spoke calmly about peace and trust, saying no one would be harmed if they waited and listened. Ethan stood beside her, feeling the ground hummed quietly under his feet. No one fired a shot, but the air was tight with tension. From the dome, the leaders watched through their screens, unsure what to do. The moment held the breath of history. A single mistake could end the fragile understanding between two branches of humanity. Leora turned slightly toward Ethan. Though her expression stayed calm for the soldiers, her eyes met his with quiet meaning. "Whatever happens," she whispered, "remember this moment. It began with trust." He nodded. The light from the structure brightened behind them, casting long shadows on the ground. The story of two worlds stood at its first real test, and no one could tell which way the next heartbeat would turn. The morning after the tense standoff, the camp was quiet but uneasy. Soldiers moved with stiff faces, scientists whispered over their screens, and the valley wind felt heavier than before. Ethan barely slept. He kept thinking about how close everything had been to breaking apart. The shining structure now glowed more dimly, like a lantern running low on oil. Leora was sitting on a low stone not far from the center of the valley. She looked tired but calm. When Ethan came to her, she gave him a small smile, one that tried to hide worry. "They wait," she said softly. "They will try again." "People with power always do." Ethan sat beside her. "They will think twice after yesterday. You faced them without fear." She shook her head. "Courage is easy when you have nothing to lose. But I have people who depend on me if the door is damaged. My world may never open again." Her hands folded in her lap as she stared at the faint smoke rising from a nearby generator. A voice came through the camp speakers calling all field leaders to a meeting in the dome. Ethan stood. "Should go," he said. The meeting room felt colder than the valley outside. Around a long table sat Earth's top officials, uniformed guards, and a few of the visitors who served as Leora's advisors. The air buzzed with argument. One commander slammed his palm on the table. "We cannot allow untested technology to exist without government control," he said loudly. Another replied with equal force, "We must learn cooperation. This is a turning point for our species." Ethan watched from the back, wondering if they would ever move past fear. Then Leora stood up and the room fell silent. Her voice was steady. "You call us unknown," she said, "but we are not strangers. We are what you might become, or what you once were. We came not to rule you, but to remind you of your better parts." Her words settled over the table like calm water. Some faces softened, but others turned hard. The head of the council leaned forward. "If you wish for peace, Princess, you must show proof that your intentions are good. Share your light source. Teach us this power." Leora hesitated. "It cannot be given," she said. "It must be grown. It was born from many hearts working as one. You cannot take it. You must become it." The room erupted again in voices. Ethan wanted to speak, but his throat felt dry. He could see lines of worry form on Leora's face. The discussion ended without agreement. Later that evening, Ethan found her looking at the reflection of the structure in a pool of water. The light was faint now, pulsing weakly like a heart growing tired. "Are you all right?" She nodded slowly. "Gah. The portal learns from those around it. It feels the anger here, the fear. It weakens when we stop believing in peace." Ethan looked at the structure and then at her. "Then we can't let that happen. We have to show them trust still matters." "How?" she asked softly. He thought for a moment. "Let them see what trust looks like. Let them see that we stand together." She gave him a long look. "You would stand with me against your own leaders?" "Yes," he said simply. "If truth lies with you, then I stand with truth." Her eyes shimmered slightly in the dim light. "Then you are braver than most." Before dawn, loud alarms broke through the camp. Soldiers shouted orders. Ethan rushed out and saw fire near the edge of the valley. Someone had tried to breach the structure. Sparks rose into the morning air. The portal's light flared dangerously bright. Leora ran toward it. If they keep shooting, it will explode inward. Ethan followed, shouting for the soldiers to stop. The noise swallowed his voice. The structure began to hum violently. Leora reached its base, placed her hands upon the glowing surface, and closed her eyes. The trembling slowed a little but did not stop. Ethan stepped in beside her and pressed his hands against the same spot. Strangely, the hum quieted. A warm current passed through his fingertips into his chest. He saw quick flashes in his mind cities made of light, people walking peacefully under glowing skies, laughter with no fear. Then everything grew still. When he opened his eyes, the valley was silent again. The crowd had fallen back in awe. The portal shone brighter than ever, steady and calm. Leora stepped away, pale but smiling faintly. "You're to two," she said. Ethan nodded. It showed me what peace looks like. She turned to the soldiers, who looked frightened and awed at once. "You see, the power is not ours alone. It belongs to everyone with a good heart." That night the wind softened, and the valley felt lighter, though everyone knew the struggle was far from over. In a quiet corner of the camp, Ethan sat with Leora under the stars. Neither spoke for a long time. The silence was not heavy. It was full of understanding. Even across the noise of politics and fear, two people had managed to share trust. Ethan looked at the faint glow against the dark sky and thought how much larger the world felt, no not because it held strangers, but because it held friends he had not known existed. A full month had passed since the great light filled the valley. The story had spread across the planet. Many still argued about what had happened that day. Some said it was a miracle, others said it was a trick. But for the people living inside the camp, life continued quietly. The visitors began to understand more about Earth, and the Earth teams began to realize the visitors were not so different from them. Ethan stayed busy as ever. He worked as a link between both sides, translating ideas and calming tempers when talk grew heated. He was learning to read the calm expressions of the people, who came through the portal and could tell when they were pleased or troubled. He enjoyed the work, but knew the peace was fragile. Leaders from different countries still met every few days to decide who had the right to the new technology. One cool morning, Leora asked Ethan to walk with her along the valley path. The sky was soft blue, and the grass moved gently in the wind. The glowing structure stood behind them like a giant statue of light. "My people will soon return home," she said after a while. "The passage is nearly ready, but we do not want to leave behind confusion or fear." Ethan stopped walking. "You mean you're leaving for good?" Leora looked at him. "We will come again." But this was only the first step. We wanted to show that understanding is possible. She tilted her head. "Have your people learned that yet?" Ethan tried to smile. "Some have. Others take longer." She nodded, as if she expected that answer. It is the same with every world. When they returned to camp, a new group had arrived from the Central Council. They carried neat suits, metal cases, and cold eyes. They asked for Leora to sign a cooperation deal that would give Earth control over the glowing structure whenever they wished. She read the document carefully and then shook her head. "This light cannot be owned," she said gently. "It should belong to everyone, not a few." The officials frowned. "Then we cannot guarantee your safety when you leave this valley." Ethan stepped forward. "This is against the agreement made at the first meeting," he shouted, forgetting his usual calm. Several soldiers turned toward him, their hands on their weapons. Leora raised her hand. "Peace," she said softly. Then she looked at the officials. "We ask for friendship, not ownership. If friendship is impossible, then we will still depart in peace." They left without answering. The air inside the camp grew tense. Ethan walked her back to her tent later that evening. "They will not leave it like this," he said. "They will come again." "Yes," she said. "They will come again. But we have a little time left." That night, she invited him to see something. They walked through the quiet field where the portal stood. The light around it pulsed slowly, like breathing in sleep. She drew a small silver cube from the folds of her robe and placed it on the ground. The cube opened like water, showing moving images that floated above the grass. Ethan saw great cities made of living glass, soft blue skies, and people walking beside rivers that shone in the evening light. He saw children painting on air that held color like silk. It was beautiful beyond anything he had imagined. "This is my home," she said. "It is not perfect, but it learned to stay whole. I wanted you to see it before we leave." He stared at the images in silence. When he finally spoke, his voice was low. "It's what our world could be." She nodded. "Maybe one day will be." The projection faded slowly until only the stars were left above them. They stood quietly. At that moment, a loud sound came from the west. Ethan turned and saw dark vehicles coming fast across the plain. The same officials from earlier had returned, bringing more soldiers. Commanders shouted through speakers, ordering everyone to stand aside. Leora looked at Ethan once, then stepped toward the glowing structure. "It will not survive a battle," she said calmly. "We must protect it with peace." Ethan followed her. "How?" "By believing," she said, placing her hand on the glowing surface. "The light answers only truth." He placed his hand beside hers. Together they faced the soldiers, who were yelling orders and aiming their machines. For a few seconds, time felt frozen. Then the structure began to shine more brightly than ever before, sending white light across the whole valley. The light passed through the soldiers without harm, but stopped their machines where they stood. When the glow faded, everything was still. The soldiers looked confused but unhurt. The commanders ordered them to fall back. Leora's calm presence had ended the fight without a single weapon. After everyone left, Leora turned to Ethan. "Now they have seen what true strength looks like." He smiled faintly. "Not destruction, but peace." "Yes," she said. "Peace that cannot be forced, only chosen." As dawn broke, a gentle mist rolled through the valley. The portal gleamed like the morning sun had rested inside it. Ethan and Leora stood side by side, knowing their paths would soon part. For a moment, the world felt new again, waiting for the next page of its story to begin. The morning was still when the last day came. The valley lay under a pale silver mist, and the camp was half empty. Most of the officials and soldiers had gone back to their cities, leaving only a few scientists. Quiet machines and the humming light of the great portal. For the first time in weeks there was peace, the kind that made even the air seem softer. Ethan woke early and walked out of his tent. The ground was cool under his boots, and the sunrise painted the edges of the clouds in gold. At the edge of the clearing stood Leora. She was watching the light of the portal as it shifted in color, soft blue fading into warm white. He came up beside her slowly. She turned and smiled, though there was a touch of sadness in her eyes. "It is time," she said. Ethan nodded. He had known this morning would come, but knowing and accepting it were not the same thing. "You are leaving," he said quietly. "Yes," she answered. "The path home is open again. My people are ready. If we stay longer, the door may close forever, and we would be lost between the worlds." Around them the valley seemed to hold its breath. A few of her people were already standing near the structure, ready to return. The strange silver patterns under their feet glowed brighter with each passing minute. "You don't have to go yet," Ethan said, his voice rough with emotion. "You could stay longer, help us finish what we started." She looked at him kindly. "Ethan, the choice is yours now. We shared what we could. The rest must come from your people. We cannot guide a world that does not wish to walk on its own feet." He looked down at the ground for a while. "Then tell me one thing before you go. When you first met me, when everything was confusion and fear, why did you trust me?" She took a small step closer and looked up at him. "'Cause you listened," she said. "No one else did at first. You wanted to understand, not control. That is why." He felt something tighten in his chest. "Then your journey wasn't wasted." She shook her head. "No journey that begins with trust is ever wasted." A soft tone came from the portal, low and gentle. The time had come. The other travelers moved closer, waiting for her. Ethan stood still, not trusting his voice. Leora looked at him one last time, then smiled again, the same bright, warm smile she had shown on the first day in the valley. "If your world ever learns to listen to its better voice," she said, "the door will open again, even if you cannot see it with your eyes." He wanted to speak, but found no words. She turned toward the glowing light. As she stepped into it, her figure glimmered, then slowly became part of the brightness. One by one the others followed until only the hum of the portal remained. The structure rose into the air, pulsing like a living star, then it folded in upon itself and was gone. The valley was silent. Soft wind passed through the grass, and birds began to sing again. The ground where the structure had rested was smooth, like clear glass. Ethan walked to the center and touched it. It was warm, as if the light had left a promise behind. Back at the dome, life took on a quiet rhythm again. Scientists studied their data, but none could explain how the shining structure had worked. Even the strongest machines showed nothing but faint traces of harmless energy. The soldiers who had seen the last burst of light told their stories in hushed tones, each story a little different, but all full of awe. Ethan wrote reports for the council, but his words never managed to capture what he had felt. The officials wanted facts, maps, and numbers. He could only give them simple sentences about trust, peace, and choices. Some called it poetry, others nonsense. Still, he kept doing it, because it felt like the right way to remember. Months later, he returned to the valley alone. The grass had grown tall again, and wildflowers covered the place where the portal once stood. He sat down on a flat stone near the center and looked up at the sky. It was the same sky he had always known, yet somehow grander now. He remembered her last words. "If your world learns to listen," he smiled faintly. Maybe one day, he thought, and maybe sooner than people expected. He stood up and looked once more at the quiet hills. For a moment he thought he saw a shimmer in the air, like sunlight turning to silver. It lasted only a heartbeat, but it made him hopeful. When he finally walked away, he did not feel alone. The world itself felt alive around him, full of soft sounds and quiet promise. In his heart rested the image of a girl who had smiled at the edge of light and called him husband before her friends. Not as a claim of possession, but as a sign of trust between two worlds. And somewhere beyond sight, in a place where reflections met the real.
Ow!
She smiled again, knowing that the bridge she had dreamed of was still standing.